Missouri beats out Ohio State for a Georgia Bulldog. And I like that headline so much. It's almost as good as the Tigers getting their best road victory in basketball in at least a decade. Let's talk about all of it. Right now, I'm Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And I got to say, I think it's top 25 time for Dennis Gates and company. If the Tigers can avoid a trap game against Arkansas on Saturday, but with all of the excitement of Missouri's win over Florida yesterday, well, quite honestly, I never got to some huge Missouri football news as Damon Wilson has signed with Missouri out of the transfer portal from the University of Georgia. He's going to be an edge rusher for the Tigers. Much like Darius Smith in the previous offseason cycle, the Tigers nab a really highly ranked and young prospect from Georgia out of the portal. Again, out of high school, Damon Wilson was top 5 at his position and top 50 overall in the class of 2023. So I guess the question would be, did Mr. Wilson find an easier path to playing time at Missouri, a great NIL offer, or possibly a little bit of both? Because he was definitely considered one of the best players, certainly remaining in the portal at this point in the cycle. And he had visited the Ohio State Buckeyes within the past week or so as well. So you got to assume Missouri, once again, very competitive in the NIL space because, well, the word going around is that maybe the price was a little bit too high for the Buckeyes, a little bit higher than they were willing to go for Damon Wilson. And by the way, I do think it's notable that this is a member of the 2023 class because, well, I've had some listeners for obvious reasons that have been concerned about Missouri's 2023 recruiting class after that ballyhooed class basically lost the top, well, 4 or 5 guys in it for all intents and purposes. But since Damon Wilson is a 2023 high school class guy, much like Ahmad Hardy, the running back transfer from Louisiana Monroe, and also Josiah Trotter as well from West Virginia, the linebacker, well, you're starting to see that particular class of players get some more members that basically add back to what had been lost in the 2023 class with really guys who are more proven, I think, at the FBS level than what Missouri lost. We'll have to see what happens, of course, in a year or two with the benefit of hindsight for what amounts to a trade of a few guys leaving for FBS, Power 5, Power 4 programs, I guess I should say at this point, and the guys coming in. But I think right now this is a trade that Eli Drinkwitz would absolutely make. But I have to admit, I haven't spent a ton of time talking, or I should say scouting Damon Wilson and his actual skill set as a player. But you know who has? My colleague over at Locked On Bulldogs, none other than Clint Shamblin. I texted Clint last night asking him about Damon Wilson, and here's what he had to say. He said Wilson is athletic, good football IQ, and can rush the passer well. He struggles to set the edge and against the run. But that dude is somebody anyone would want to have on their team. Good team player as well. No bad stories from him at all. I'm very sad he is in the portal, and mystery SEC team trying for him shouldn't keep him for Ohio State. Just kidding, LOL. Missouri is getting a dude for sure. So a really positive, I think, take there from Clint Shamblin. It would be easy for him to be Mr. Sour Grapes there and say, we didn't really want him anyway. But clearly that's not the take from Clint. And while maybe he's not the best against the run at the moment, I think the Tigers will take well, a guy who looks like a really good pass rusher at the very least. Missouri's done very, very well, I think, in the portal in general. But I think specifically at defensive line the past 3 cycles, going all the way back to DJ Coleman a few years ago, I think Missouri's done extraordinarily well with defensive linemen and edge rushers in the portal. So hopefully Damon Wilson and also Darius Smith, if he gets healthy this offseason, ready to go, hopefully a couple of Georgia Bulldogs can hit their enormous potential with Missouri. And speaking of future Missouri Tigers, Ahmad Hardy at running back and Josiah Trotter at linebacker, both of those young men were named by the Football Writers Association of America as freshman All-American this past season. So again, to my point that Missouri is replacing some of its lost 2023 high school class with guys who are actually a little bit more proven in terms of production at the Power 5 level, at the very least at the FBS level, in Louisiana Monroe's Ahmad Hardy at the very least. The Hardy thing, hey, if you want to question his production at a lower level of football, that's a fair question to have. Just for my eyes, I think Hardy is ready to level up and take his game to the SEC to the point where I think he can be the absolute workhorse running back for Missouri next season. And by the way, let's talk a little bit. Let's transition to basketball here a little bit, because obviously still flying high off of an incredible road victory by Missouri last night. I think if Missouri can go to Florida and win a game, I think it's safe to say that this Missouri team can truly beat anyone left on its schedule. Does that mean the Tigers are going to go undefeated the rest of the way? Of course not. I'm simply saying there's not one game on this schedule where you can just chalk it off as a Missouri loss at this point. And for all the people who are asking if the Tigers are going to be ranked after this victory, well, with one more game on the schedule before the rankings come out, of course, against Arkansas at 5:30 on Saturday, I think if the Tigers take care of the Razorbacks, I think that's a pretty safe bet that Missouri will be ranked at 4-1 in the SEC with 15 wins overall, if indeed Missouri beats Arkansas. And a couple signature victories, too. One against Kansas, and probably even more impressively from the committee's perspective, on the road against Florida. So, to me, if you're Dennis Gates, it's really important here to not let the Tigers get too full of themselves this week. I'm frankly glad it was a Tuesday game, not a Wednesday or certainly a Thursday game. Gives the Tigers a little bit of time to wind down emotionally. And Arkansas, after now going 0-4, losing at home by 4 to LSU, or actually it was on the road, excuse me for that. They lost at LSU, did Arkansas yesterday. Well, clearly the Razorbacks are going to be desperate. If they have a chance to save this season, they may well need to beat Missouri on Saturday. The Hogs are absolutely desperate, and while it is popular to pick on John Calipari right now, and I understand why people enjoy dunking on John Calipari, but obviously he's not a complete moron who's forgotten everything about basketball. And most importantly, he's a veteran coach who knows how to push buttons, who knows how to get his guys motivated. So I'm not saying Arkansas is going to win or anything, but I bet his guys are going to be ready to play on Saturday. And certainly I think this Razorback team is probably better than that 0-4 record would indicate. And I had one listener who said that last night's game was easily a top 10 win of his lifetime in basketball. And my first response was, well, maybe that depends on your age, but the more I looked at it, yeah, that actually may be underselling this. This is a really rare victory by Missouri. I'll put it all into context for you here coming up in just a second. But first, after the holiday hustle, there is really nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine and a workflow. Well, whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need and all within your budget. The best thing about WayFair is not only is it affordable, to me, some of the best looking furniture you can find on the internet as well. My favorite part, though, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. WayFair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time whatsoever. So give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That is WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. So listener Sam says, easily a top 10 win in basketball in my lifetime as a Mizzou fan. So many incredible and nerve-wracking moments from tonight's game. And again, my first response was, well, it does probably depend on your age, but hey, if you just want to cut it off, let's say the top 10 from the post-Norm Stewart era, basically from 2000 and on, well, I started listing them out, and I thought, you know what? I may be underselling it a little bit, especially if you don't include postseason basketball. Just off the top of my head, I quickly went, okay, the Zaire Taylor game, 2009 KU, the Marcus Denman game in 2012 against KU. Of course, making the Elite Eight, beating UCLA in the Sweet 16, beating Memphis in the Sweet 16, Marquette in the tournament, Clemson in the tournament. Well, really, though, and then, of course, beating Baylor a couple times to win the Big 12 championship. But really, the closer I look at it, boy, that game last night is even more rare than I thought, because clearly this is a top 10 victory in the post-Norm era, but it's probably even better than that. According to Missouri historian Tom Orff, Missouri with a top 5 AP road wins ever. Well, the aforementioned Baylor in 2012, in Allen Fieldhouse also in 94 and in 1990, and finally, Missouri beating Iowa State in 1957. So this is just the 5th win ever over a top 5 AP team on the road for Missouri. Pretty incredible. That's how rare of a feat this is for Missouri or most college basketball programs. Let's face it. And by the way, Missouri had such a great start last night. Some more context for that as well. With 50 points in the first half, the Tigers had not hit that mark in the first half against an SEC opponent since January 11th, 2020, also against the Florida Gators, by the way. And they hadn't had that much in the first half against any opponent on the road since all the way back in January of 2009, about 16 years ago at this point. So obviously, with all that context, just makes the win last night, I think, even sweeter for Missouri fans. And post-game, Dennis Gates had some interesting comments about Mark Mitchell that I thought really spoke to Dennis's coaching strategy in general. On Mitchell, Gates said, he allows me to coach him hard. Trust me, he allows me to coach him very hard, very difficult, and I push him. And when I say push him, I push our guys behind closed doors and let them play with their instincts during the game. And that's why I'm always kind of smiling or in sort of a monotone facial expression. I don't overly do anything on the sidelines. But Mitchell is one of the best and was one of the most versatile players in the country, and I'm thankful he chose Mizzou. So sometimes I see some Missouri fans, when Missouri's offense stagnates, especially in the half court, there's a lot of, hey, why aren't our guys moving? Why aren't they doing stuff? Why are our wings just kind of standing there? This is a common complaint when things go awry. Well, number one, Gates is, as he points out here, he's just simply not the type of guy who is going to micromanage every single possession, offensively or defensively. Think Buzz Williams from Texas A&M. The guy is practically on the court a few feet at all times, just pointing and gesticulating, telling all 5 guys seemingly where they need to go, how they need to think, and what they need to do at every second of the basketball game. Now, obviously, as you can tell from my tone there, that is not my favorite style of basketball, but clearly Buzz Williams is a good coach, so it's not as though that style can't be effective. And I have to say, now that I've laid all that out, my point here is that, yes, there is a downside to letting your players figure it out for all intents and purposes. Dennis Gates says, hey, I trust them. I trust them to play with their instincts. But, of course, with that trust, there's also a real upside to me, too. You see what happened with T.O. Barrett at the end of the game, for example, against Florida, also against Peyton Marshall for some important minutes against Kansas in that victory. I think letting players, especially the young players, really play with their instincts is going to pay dividends in the long run. Because to me, when the going gets tough, what I don't want to see is my player looking to the sidelines, to me, the coach, or to the coaches, and trying to figure out what to do. When the going gets tough, I want my players to be able to figure it out on the fly, because that's basketball. You have to figure out everything on the fly. It's probably the most, improv-based sport that we have here in America, at least among, the big three, that type of deal. So to me, while obviously there are downsides, there are trade-offs to every type of coaching style, to me, I totally applaud Dennis Gates for letting his players have some freedom, because especially, hey, early in the season, you're going to see some mistakes, but to me, long run, I think it pays the dividends. I really do. And my friend and 4%er, yes, a member of the female audience, Jennifer Anafrio writes in and says, I see nothing but upside to this team at this point. We still haven't played our best basketball for an entire game. And to Jen's point, I think that last statement is absolutely true. Missouri has played tremendous basketball for a half here and there, for sure. Certainly a great first half last night. In fact, that seems to be the pattern. Missouri plays really excellent first halves sometimes and, well, maybe takes their foot off the pedal, whatever it might be in the second half. I think the referees may have had a little something to do with ruining the pace of that basketball game yesterday at the very least. But again, I think Jen is definitely on to something here. And to my point, I think the way Dennis Gates is using his rotations, seemingly he knows more than we do, guys. I have to say, again, a few weeks ago I said the rotation argument is dead. There's method to Dennis's madness. I think we're seeing that once again. He's getting really about the best you could possibly expect out of this roster. And if you don't believe me, well, Missouri all the way up to 33rd in the KenPom projections. They started off the season about 52nd. So clearly the Tigers are playing above expectations, both offensively and defensively, by the way. And for as much praise as I've heaped on Missouri basketball here the past couple episodes, I think I've undersold one part of that performance yesterday. So let's get to that here in just a second. But first, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down and even cancel them from within your Rocket Money app. And here's the best part. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it is your subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. And I'm just telling you, from my personal experience with all of these different, not only all these different possible subscriptions, but heck, I have multiple emails, multiple credit cards. It gets a little bit hard to keep track of all of this at a certain point. Well, this is where Rocket Money comes in. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So while this version of Missouri is not a great defensive team yet, nor a great rebounding team yet, well, it is by far the best defensive team that Dennis Gates has had here in 3 years at Missouri, and the best rebounding team he's had at Missouri as well. And I think they're getting better on both of those counts as the year is going along here. I think especially defensively. But one thing's for sure, Missouri was undersized last season in its 0-19 campaign. Heck, the Tigers were undersized the previous season as well. They just had, well, a lot more efficient offense, to say the least. Well, Missouri is no longer small, and not only are they not small, they're athletic too. And to be able to hang on the boards with Florida yesterday was really, really impressive. Florida came in as one of, if not the elite offensive rebounding teams in the entire country. So the fact that the Tigers overall basically fought that to a stalemate. I think overall the Tigers lost the rebounding battle by 1. As I said on social media yesterday, sure, the Tigers technically lost the battle there, but anything even close to a stalemate there, I think has to be considered a win for the Tigers. You will take that trade-off, considering the Tigers still did an effective job of getting in the passing lanes, forcing turnovers. As I've said before, that style, it's going to leave you prone to being out of position sometimes on the glass. So it's not even really a lack of effort, a lack of size or athleticism or anything like that when Missouri occasionally gets caught out of position on the glass. So the fact, again, that the Tigers were basically able to fight to a draw on the glass is just really, really impressive, and the guys deserve a ton of credit for their effort yesterday on the glass. And listener Ralph says, you have to have depth to win on the road in college basketball, and Missouri has that. As long as they take care of home court, which they should win all of their home games, Missouri can finish top 3 in the SEC conference this year, in my opinion. Well, I'll just say this. I think, number one, winning all of the home games is going to be tough. Obviously, holding court as much as possible is going to be critically important for the Tigers. Trademark Gary Pinkel. But I think the important thing here is that not only with the win last night on the road against Florida, I think the win over Kansas gives you a little bit of wiggle room at home to where Missouri could certainly lose a game or even 2 at home and still wind up 500 or better in the conference and certainly on the right side of the March Madness bubble. But to Ralph's point, certainly winning as many home games as possible is going to be really important. And Arkansas, who Missouri is projected to win by about 5 points right now, not exactly a blowout. Well, that's about as easy as it's going to get at home for the Tigers the rest of the season. So again, to Ralph's point, this is a critical game, and really every home game from here on out is going to be critical. But Missouri still has top 20 caliber teams in Mississippi, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Kentucky still remaining at home. So to win all of those games, that might be a tough task. But again, Missouri has given itself a little bit of wiggle room now. I think that is the main takeaway here. And finally, listener Mark says props to Coach Gates for the work he's done so far, considering much of the rotation is holdovers from a generationally bad team. Well, no doubt Coach Gates has been great this season. I can't argue with that whatsoever. But really, when you look at it, as far as holdovers from last year's team, it's really just Tamar Bates and Anthony Robinson. Because while, yes, Caleb Grill and Trent Pierce and Aiden Shaw were all on the team last season, obviously Grill sat out the majority of the season with injury. Pierce had his ear infection problems, his own health problems all of last season too. And Aiden Shaw wasn't a huge factor last season, and so far hasn't been a huge factor this season, at least in SEC play so far either. So really it was just Tamar Bates and Anthony Robinson who are the biggest really returners from last year's team. And, well, Anthony Robinson had his own issues in terms of, well, he had a tragedy in his life. His grandma, who he and his family were very close to, passed away in the middle of the season. I think that derailed a little bit of what was a promising freshman season for Robinson. But what you're seeing, I think, is a real big-time breakthrough his sophomore year. So he's almost a new guy this season to me as well, even though obviously he was around all year last season. So to Mark's point, though, Dennis Gates has obviously done a great job of coaching here, getting all of these new guys to buy into what he wants to do, and it seems like these guys have a real chemistry both on and off the court. That's an impressive coaching job to get that type of thing done in just one off season. Really impressive stuff. The idea of, hey, I'm just going to have my guys together, we'll develop them for years and years. That's obviously really not as much of modern-day college sports anymore as it used to be. But, hey, thanks as always for joining me here on Locked On Mizzou and making this show your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Chris Gordy's Locked On SEC on YouTube, wherever you listen to audio podcasts. I'll be back on the squad tomorrow, having a good time with those guys as always. Just talking a bunch of junk, having a good time with the squad. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks for listening to Locked on Mizzou.